Hi, I'm Dr. Gemma, and welcome back to Cognitive, the Knitting Psychology podcast. Cheerfully and somewhat irregularly in business since 2008. Segments today may include what's on my hooks, needles, and spindles, a strategy, something I really like, put a lid on it, oh shoot, and blather. So sit back, put your feet up, pick up your knitting, crocheting, spinning, weaving, or dyeing, or any other yarny thing you're doing, and get ready to enjoy. Hi, it's Dr. Gemma, and welcome to episode 104 of the Cognitive Podcast, which should be called, that is, this episode should be called Stitches SoCal 2022, but instead is being called Banishment, because it's been such a strange, funny, and eventful week. Top of the episode statement, with a name like that, you should know we're all just fine, and everything's going well. But it has been a crazy, funny week. I want to let you know that I will not be adding you to any of my social media groups because I have so many robo accounts spamming me at this point, so I keep my groups locked. So I'm really, really sorry. However, you can follow me on the blog at cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com. And when I talk about the show notes, that's really what I'm talking about. And you can respond there. You can also follow me on Ravelry. We have a group, Cognitive Podcast, I think it's called. Oh, no, Cognitive, actually. I'm looking at the tab on my computer. You can comment in either place. I will see it and get to it. That leads me to say that in the warm thanks department, Tiny Shiny Things, thank you about reminding me about Randy Rainbow on YouTube. Randy Rainbow is wonderful. He's a musician. He's hilarious. He's a political commentator. The way he does it is he does parody songs, like musical songs, like Rodgers and Hammerstein type musical, with himself recording harmonies on various tracks. And he does these to criticize politics. He's just wonderful. He's thoughtful, he's intelligent, he's very shrewd. His lyrics are brilliant. Yes, TST, I do know Randy Rainbow, and I thank you for the reminder because I really would push him. I just think he's terrific, and I would recommend people listen to him. I would like to thank Peachy, Smidge, and Cynthia for really, really making my stitches great. I went for one day. I ended up hooking up with the traveling Gin sisters and their friend Cynthia, really Peachy's friend, I think. I had so much fun with them. I don't even know how to tell you, so I will rave on about it in the blather, I'm sure. In the meantime, speaking of responding, Nose in a Book gave a series of really intelligent, thoughtful comments. One was that there are indeed YouTube videos about cats being groomed for their fur, and then the fur being used to make tiny replicas of cats with needle felting. This probably has something to do with the fact that people keep saying to me, oh, are you needle felting them into little tiny cats? So that's where you're all getting it from. Apparently the cats approve of this, which to me would mean they quite like being brushed and they like the little needle-felted replicas of themselves. I'm sure they do. Minerva is really fascinated by her own fur on the spindle and on the brush. Nose in Book says, I just wish I had a nice brush. I've been looking for years. Yeah, that's a little cheap brush that I just picked up off a shelf at PetSmart years and years ago. At the time, I kind of resented how tiny it was, but it's got a little tiny head on it, and that's actually very maneuverable around a small cat body. And it's true, I just treat it like any kind of wool combing brush. I just scrape the wool off with my fingers, rolling it a little bit to get an easy roll-ag to manage. Nose in a Book also mentions that she used to work as a volunteer for the Red Cross, and they used a TTY to help the deaf community. And she says it was really confusing because on a TTY, deaf people are typing the way they sign. And of course, they don't sign in English. They sign in American Sign Language if you're in America, typically. And those are not the same thing, and they don't come across the same way. And, so it's very hard, as she says, it couldn't be understood without practice. That's true. My deaf patients, when I read their intakes, my normal first reaction is this person cognitively disabled? Yeah, they get that a lot. No, they're speaking a different language, and it includes a different word order and different grammar. So it's very, very interesting. And the TTY, you think, well, that's great. They'll type in their thing, and we can all type back. And it's like, no, remember, they are speaking a different language. She also mentions that there was an ASL group or a deaf group that was meeting at the Red Cross, and that they were very supportive of non-signers because, yeah, they are. I mean, they really are, in my experience, too. You see this all the time on the deaf Facebook channels. People saying with a sort of outrage, look, you hearing people, you're always telling us, oh, I wish I learned ASL. Well, go learn it. And yeah, they get that all the time from the hearing. Oh, yeah, ASL, that's so cool. I want to learn that. Can you imagine walking up to a native Spanish speaker and going, oh, you speak Spanish, that's so cool. I want to learn that too. Do you get it? If somebody walked up to you as a native English speaker, I'm assuming that because you're listening to this podcast, you may not be. But if somebody walks up to you and says, oh, you speak English, that's so cool. I want to learn that too. I mean, condescending much? Okay. So the deaf have recognized, for the most part, that they have a sense of humor about it, is what I'm going to say. Like, this is the way it is, that the mainstream is hearing. And so they get this comment, and if they were going to get mad every time, I think they'd spend a lot of time in anger, and that's kind of pointless. One thing you got to say about the deaf community, they have a really good sense of humor about what the hearing are doing, because it's that or be angry. So anyway, they're very respectful of it, and they really do try to help you. Even people who are frustrated, why don't hearing people try to learn sign more often? They're very helpful. Why? Because you're doing what they want you to do. So they really will put up with a lot, in my humble experience. And Nose in a Book says she thinks the author did it right by translating ASL in that kind of choppy style, because it shows what it's like to speakers of English. And I respect the point. I got to think about that. Because she says, well, if you don't speak ASL, then you will be confused by the way it transcribes into English. Yeah, my reaction to the book was, this is biased towards the hearing, but I see her point. It's not. It's biased towards native English speakers. And since you're reading a book in English, you do have that bias simply by definition. And yeah, there are plenty of deaf people that are native English speakers that lost their hearing later in life, and ASL is a second language for them. So there you go. Thank you, Nose in a Book. It's a wonderful set of comments, very intelligent, very thought-provoking. I really appreciate that. All right, going back into the show notes, you can see a picture of Cynthia and Smidgen, and they are at Teton Yarn's booth. She had a pile of minis at her booth. Turns out, Smidge and Cynthia are both color geniuses, and I don't say that lightly. They really are. And so they plowed into this huge pile of mini skeins and started sorting them to gradients and just color collections. Oh, I bought one right away, so that's so beautiful. The owner of the shop started taking pictures of their combinations so she could sell them as a group instead of as individuals. I bought 1/6 mini skein combination. I don't know what I'm going to make with it, and I don't care. It's beautiful. You will see also a picture of me standing between the wonderful Jin sisters. That's Smidgen on my right, your left, looking at the picture. And on your right, my left, looking at the picture, is the wonderful Peachy. Have a good look at the beautiful fade cardigan that Smidge is wearing. She helped me select colors to make one in DK. I've yet to make it, but look at the way those colors fade. That is what I'm talking about. She is brilliant with color. I'm also going to point out Smidge is wearing a dress she made herself. Turns out Smidge is like wildly off the rails crafty and is making everything. I am wearing in that picture one of my cowls. I think it's the slash dot. And then I am wearing my beloved brick in Let me think for a minute. Malabrigo Rios in Wales Road. It looks a little darker gray-green than it is. It's actually very deep blue. Okie dokie. COVID, you know the drill. Get your vaccines. Make sure you're carrying around proof you've got your vaccine, as I found this weekend at Stitches. I was really happy they wanted proof that we were immunized, and I was very happy to give it to them. I will probably talk a little more about that later. What's on my hooks and needles? Well, nothing is finished, but in progress. I added a new one. As you can see from the show notes, I bought a show color from Dizzy Blonde Studios. This was in honor of the late Nichelle Nichols, our own beloved Lieutenant Uhura. If you are a fan of the original Trek and the more recent movies. And it is called Hailing Frequencies Open. I knew I was going to make a hat out of it, because those are colors I would not wear as a sweater or a shawl. That's going to be mitts or a hat, a sort of more throw-on thing. I can't match those colors with any of my scrap sweaters that I can think of, but I did love it. It's a perfect evocation of Uhura's uniform. Now, if you look at it carefully, you will see that Laura dyed it so that you can use it for assigned pooling projects. I had heard of that vaguely. I finally saw some shawls and cowls with assigned pooling. I don't really like it. I don't like the way it looks, but I can understand why people would. I think that's just my preferences. I wouldn't say assigned pooling is ugly. I think this is just a Gemma thing. You know, like me with beads in yarn. It's just a Gemma thing. It doesn't make any sense. It's my taste. I'm allowed to have it. But the rest of you, I'm not criticizing you. Please go out and have fun with assigned pooling. And please know, this is a terrific yarn for it. If you look at the picture of the hat I'm knitting, and I'm knitting it in Pearl Soho's basic ribbed hat pattern, which is 4DK, which is why I love it so. And I've made one already. And I really quite like this pattern. And you can see when you look at the pooling that it's assigned pooling. However, I have to tell you, not using a pattern specifically designed for assigned pooling is not hurting this hat. That the assigned pooling looks great without any special pattern. It's pooling in a really, really pretty way on the hat. So I'm kind of loving that hat. And I know I'm going to wear it for those days when I need to be a spicy chili pepper person. It's just gorgeous. The other skein that I also bought from Laura, that is also an assigned pooling type of dyeing job. And that's probably going to go into one of the Romule sweaters. I have two potential Romules. One is green themed and one is blue themed. And I think I want to do the blue themed. And that Romule, the DK weight, I could double that and use it just brilliantly in that. And I'm sure it'll look really cool doubled. So it's a DK weight. And the yarn I got is a DK weight. She also had it in a sock weight. No love on the lane splitter. They don't know yet. December 8th is D-Day. That's when we get to 342 squares. At that point, I'll probably have more like 350. Do I mind knitting extra squares? No, I don't. Is the pile of yarn on my desk getting smaller? Yes, it is. It's really wild to say that big box has come down to this. However, also on my desk, the 19 black squares that I'm seaming together, I'm probably about 10 seams into that, and it's going very nicely. I'm enjoying doing the seaming, no problems there. I did pick up an embroidery kit, and I will talk about that when I do it. I picked that up at Stitches, and also before I get to it, I want to finish my Pennsylvania Dutch embroidery, which I'm really looking forward to. That's feeling very Romule. We'll see. I'm getting the itch to embroider again. And once I start embroidering, I tend not to knit. I tend to just sit down and power through embroidery because I really, really enjoy it. The Wrapped in Tiny Chains, no love, because again, I'm saving my hands for ASL, so crocheting is pretty much limited right now to the Don't Know Yet blanket. The Lady Eleanor shawl, I am in the middle of skein 4 out of 11, and I'm just loving it. I'm just loving it. Also, a moment of mourning. The original brick that I made in the Malabrigo Rios Archangel, where I did not handle the end of row well, and so it came out down the middle of the front, so it looked like I had a zipper. Moths got it. Yes, we got mothed. My husband discovered his sweater collection at the top of his closet got mothed. So today he's in there sorting it out and getting rid of the things that have holes. And I don't know how my brick got hit. Sadly, the brick was folded in with other sweaters, so we will see if they got hit. But so far, so good. It's winter. And so my husband's doing research, and he's freezing sweaters to try to rescue them. That first he's washing them, and then he's going to freeze them. I may also look at doing that come spring, if no more sweaters come out as mothed. The moths, of course, come out in the warmer weather. So if you want to save them, it sounds like it's freezing or microwaving. His sources recommend putting them in a vacuum-sealed bag and then freezing them, of course, because you're killing all the air. So if anything does manage to hatch. I have heard people say that the eggs can survive freezing. I don't know. I guess it's an experiment, but it explains why I kept seeing moths in that region of the house over the summer. I kept thinking, I mothed this place out. Why do we have these? So he's going to also clean out that closet, which is a very good thing. A deep cleaning never hurts. So, alas, ave atque vale to the beautiful Archangel brick with the zipper down the front. I'm glad. If it had to hit any of my sweaters, that would have been my first choice, frankly. And so, nothing to do but get rid of it because it may have eggs all over it. So it went out to the trash, and that was a sad day, and I thanked it profusely before I bade it a sad farewell. Just when you think you've got this full wardrobe of woolen-made things, you realize things like that happen. We do work to keep things in Tupperware to avoid the spread, and we do wash out Tupperware routinely. But, these things happen. Okay, my favorite resource just keeps growing. So what have we got so far? Lisa Souza yarns and Dizzy Blonde for my favorite hand dyers. Webs for supplies. And then I've got a bunch of LYSs that have just grown there. These are in no particular order. Sierra Cottons and Wools in Bishop, California. The Altered Stitch in Valley Village. If you're in LA, I highly recommend them. The Knitting Tree down by the airport, down by LAX. And also L'Atelier on Ventura Boulevard. Those are all the ones I frequent. Also, Wool End Company online if you need to restock your larger maker yarns. So there you go. That's my list. They all have links in my show notes. Dizzy Blondes, well, of course, the gins got me. I walked into Stitches and Peachy grabbed me and said, "You're spinning Minerva." And I said, "Yes, I'm thinking I'm going to ply her against silk," which was Gigi Knitmore's idea, which I think is a great idea. Silk has a very, very long staple length. And so when you blend it with a shorter staple length thing, the longer staple length wraps around and prevents the pilling. And silk, the staple length is as large as the cocoon is long when you unravel it. So that's a great idea. So Peachy said yes. And there's this fabulous bunch of people, and they have camel hair silk blend braids for spinning. And then she pulled out, this insanely beautiful cinnamon golden honey brown with cream. And you can see a picture of, I got the last skein of it. Strangely, it ends with some dark purple. So, of course, I got a purple skein as well. So this is what I will be plying against Minerva. And these were really reasonably priced. It was $10 an ounce. She had 2-ounce braids. For silk, that's doing just fine. Where did I get this from? Pearly Shell Fiber Arts. And I did interview them, and that interview will be attached to the end of this episode. So thank you, Gigi, for the suggestion about the silk. Thank you, Peachy, for the enabling. Oh, they're so beautiful. I'm looking at the pictures. There's also a link to Pearly Shell Fiber Arts. They have an LYS. They are in Ilwaco, Washington, along the Columbia. If I can get my butt up there, I am so going to go look at their shop because you just had to see their booth. It was tasty. Okay, on to a strategy. We've been doing Dear Man, the basic communication skill. How do I ask for what I want? Straight up, without worrying about conflict or anything else. We'll get into how I handle this in terms of conflict when we get to the fast skills. But how do I handle just asking for what I want? We're on the R of Dear Man. The R stands for reward your listener. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Boy, oh boy. Speaking of how true is this, most people use body language when we talk. So if I'm talking to you, and I'm pretty neurotypical, then when you are listening to me, if you're really interested, you will use your body to convey it. And you will also use your body to communicate. And there's all those beautiful trite statements, 60% of all human discourse is through body language. I don't know how they measure that, but it is true. This is one of the problems in autism, is people with autism do not tend to understand the body language. They have to sort of learn it and memorize it, and they often will not provide the body language. That is important when we talk about the R in Dear Man. There are also people with personality disorders who have trouble with this. So it is not that uncommon for people not to reward the listener. How do you reward a listener? Well, the upfront thing, verbally, you might go, and you might ask them questions. Wait a minute. If what you're saying is true, then would this also be true, blah, blah, blah. That is rewarding to the listener. It shows you're involved. It shows you're interested. Let me separate that verbal response from interruption. When someone is talking and you just start running over them, it shows that you're not actually listening. It shows instead that you are thinking about what you're going to say next, instead of listening and responding to their actual content. So when I say reward the listener verbally, I'm not saying interrupt. I'm saying listen and respond to points. And how you do that is the body language part. So, in other words, if I'm talking and I'm explaining something to you, you might say, or you might simply nod your head as each point is completed. So that shows you have heard and you're taking it in. Now, my body language will respond when I see you nodding. I may pause. And I may not be aware I'm doing it, but I'm pausing because you're acknowledging me, and that is a typical body language enabling for the listener to ask a question. So there is such a thing as the natural pause. In other words, even when you're lecturing in a class, there is the natural pause, okay? And this is a sub-linguistic level. So I am explaining something to you. You are nodding. You nod, and at a subverbal level, I recognize that you're acknowledging a completed point, and I pause instinctively, and that lets you ask a question. This goes more deep than that, because we're not always explaining things, unless you're me. I tend to spend my life explaining things. Honestly, I don't know how y'all put up with it, but thank you. I'm grateful. Not to mention telling stories. All right. But there are other things going on that reward a listener. One is nodding. One is simply nodding. One is asking questions, but that's verbal. Another way you reward a listener is you silence your breath. This is one you don't think of. But when people are bored, they tend to go, Okay. So if your listener's making noises, you want to pay attention to that. They're signaling not so happy. So when you are listening respectfully, one of the things you do is you breathe normally, but you make sure you're not giving off loud noises accidentally. Assuming, by the way, you're hearing. If you're not hearing, that's a whole other issue. Okay, so you reward the listener. If I'm talking to you and I'm asking for something, I'm going to use my body. Open posture. I don't cross my arms. Crossing arms is a sign of self-defense. We all do it. We all do it. You smile. When I'm asking you for something, I'm going to smile, and I'm going to have relaxed face. So if you're upset, your face will be tight. So you work on having a calm expression. You work on arms down, arms not crossed, or arms in a casual position. Maybe you're leaning on a table or something, okay? You want to stand still if you can. I'm a little hyperactive by nature, and so I bounce a bit. But you do try to be as still as you can be. So when you're talking to someone and you're asking for something, you have to make them feel good. That's part of your job. You're trying to persuade them. All speech, get it through your head. All writing, these are all acts of persuasion. There is nothing evil or manipulative. Why would I talk to you if I didn't have some goal? We're walking down the road and I happen to see you and I say, hey, how you doing? I'm reinforcing our friendship. I'm walking next to you. We're on a hike. I stop and I take a deep breath. I'm not really persuading you, but I stop, I look around and say, look at that view. Isn't that amazing? I am persuading you. I'm sharing a view with you. I'm persuading you that I like you. I'm helping you join my happy experience. All speech, all writing, all of it. These are acts of persuasion. There's nothing exploitative or rude. It builds human relationships. But you must reward your listener. So when I am asking for something, open, relaxed body posture, relaxed face, friendly expression. I may nod if they're commenting. I'm going to try to smile. If they ask me questions about what I'm asking for, no sarcasm. That's going to come in on the M, mindfulness. Don't be sarcastic. You're asking for something. Why would you be mean to the person you're asking to give you things? Okay, so remember, you're pleasant, you're open. This is rewarding to your listener. But hey, what if you don't get what you want? Or what if they start looking suspicious or they intimate that you're somehow trapping them? That is all the more reason to reward your listener. You need to smile and be friendly. No, this isn't a trick. No, I really am asking you for this. No, I am very serious. What if you see that they're starting to reach for denial? No, you can't have what you want from me no matter how much you use dear man. You still need to reward that. If they tell you no, you still need to reward that. You need to say, okay, and you can ask them, can you explain why I can't have that? And you have to do that respectfully and kindly. You're rewarding when you do this. If they give you a dead flat no, you need to learn to smile and go, okay, I may not be convinced, but I hear you. I need time to think about that. Don't get into your wrong. Just say, I need time to think about it. Why? Even if you know they're wrong. Telling them that to their face, you're not going to get very far. Remember, act of persuasion. Okay, so that is the R of Dear Man. Reward the listener. In the fluffy books, let's see, you know everything that's there. So I'm just going to say this week on YouTube, I watched the documentary again through Deaf Eyes. I put a link to the YouTube video. This is a PBS and Gallaudet University co-production. I really recommend you watch it. It's just under 2 hours. It's really wonderful. I watched it the first time, I liked it. I watched it the second time a few weeks later, in fact, this past week. I was very, very impressed. These small films by deaf artists, they alone would make this wonderful. There was one called That's My Marshmallow, where a deaf maker of documentaries, I guess, I can't think of her name, and I'm sorry, I can't, Tracy, and I can't remember the last name. She responds to the comment, deafness is shaped. It is not a one-size-fits-all. And she talks about her experience. I was stunned how her experience as a child with deafness paralleled my experience as a child with a very minor visual disability. I have no depth perception. There was a moment in her film where she has a doctor saying to the parent, which is presumably her parent, your child is cognitively disabled, which is now the polite way of saying mentally retarded. I was diagnosed at 6 months old with mental retardation because I had no depth perception. I am not mentally retarded or cognitively disabled or whatever you want to call it. I am not. Obviously, I think the 2 PhDs kind of give that away. But a doctor who can't be bothered or is somewhat incompetent or should not be diagnosing disability, that's not that uncommon. I was stunned. And then the next doctor says, your daughter is absolutely normal. My parents went through this too. Through the age of 7, they were still struggling with it because then they got a surgeon who did the right thing, but then he started doing unnecessary surgery on me. So my problem is something that is managed usually with 1 to 2 surgeries. He did 4 before the age of 15, and then he realized I was never going to let it happen again. I wasn't going to cooperate. So the risks of being different are magnified by the way it gets treated in childhood. And I've been down that road. And now in my life, after everybody said, we'll do the surgery, they said, so you're fixed and that's that. I am not fixed. I never have been fixed. I look normal because one of my eyes has simply been prohibited from moving in a way that does not look normal. So my left eye for many years could not roll up because that's how they fixed it. It didn't do a damn thing for me. So now I was getting gaslighted. I laugh because, I'm growing up and doctors and nurses are saying, too bad about your double vision. I've never had double vision. Why? A good ophthalmologist will tell you. The other option, you can have double vision, but the other option, and the common option in a situation like mine, is your brain picks an eye and uses it. So in other words, it simply screens out the other eye's vision. So I selectively look through my right eye because my left eye is crossed. As I am aging, the surgery is gradually slipping, and so I'm more cross-eyed than ever. I enjoy this. I think when I'm 80, I'm going to be the witch at every Halloween party because I'll have two eyes pointing two different directions. You get a sense of humor about that, and that's what really came through on this documentary. Now, the deaf people were generously laughing at the stories they are telling of this kind of experience, of childhood gaslighting, of the hearing, treating them as less than, all sorts of things. I really recommend this. And I think at the end, the very moving thing for me at the end, one of the artists, C.J. Jones, talks about, I am not disabled. And it finally got through to me. I've really struggled with that issue. Are deaf people disabled? Well, they accept disability money in American culture. So are they saying they're disabled? And is that fair if you're not disabled and you take disability money? What Mr. Jones brought home to me is when you say this is a disability, that means the rest of us who don't have it, we are the haves. You with it, you are the have-nots. And so when we grant you access to the mainstream through interpreters or teletype machines or whatever, when we do that, we are giving you a gift. And we don't have to give gifts. That's optional. That's the problem with disability. When you look at difference, when you say deaf people can do everything, they can do almost everything that hearing people can do, but I'm hearing, and there are things I can't do that I'm sure deaf people can do, one of them being speak ASL really fluently, because I have a visual disability that makes me clumsy. Let's be honest. That's what you get when you don't have depth perception. You're physically clumsy, and I am, okay? So there are deaf people fluently speaking ASL, and my hands are slower because of my inability to work with depth. Just believe me when I say it. It's hard to explain it if you haven't been there. And that's exactly what C.J. Jones says. You don't understand deafness if you haven't been there. And so he says, I am not disabled. And now, when you say that, what are you saying? So you're not disabled, what are you? Well, you're different than the mainstream. However, if you're just different, then don't we have an obligation to bring you into the mainstream? And that means disability is a gift. If I give you interpreters, I'm giving you a gift. And I don't have to give gifts. That's an act of generosity. But if I'm acknowledging difference and I'm bringing it into the mainstream, that's a human right. At least America defines it as a human right. And that is no different than saying, I am Italian American. My people came through Ellis Island. We were Italian speakers. The Americans gave us access to the English language so we could join the mainstream. And that's not to say there was no discrimination, because my people are Southern Italian, we're brown, so there was. And also, they spoke with an accent, okay? So when you talk about it this way, when you talk about difference has a right to be brought into the mainstream, and when we bring that into the mainstream, all people benefit. We're not just talking about physical difference like deafness. We're talking about racial difference. We're talking about gender difference. If the mainstream is defined as white male, then the rest of us, we have a right to join it. And by joining it, we do change it. This was a very powerful message. I really, really respectfully suggest you go watch this video and see what I'm talking about. And they're really relentless. They talk about racism in the deaf community. They talk about all the isms. It's a very, very good thing. Something I really like, Plum Deluxe teas. They don't sugar their leaves, and they guarantee it. I was horrified. I went to a tea store down in Del Amo in LA, and I found out sugar can be called a natural ingredient under American labeling laws. So a lot of times sugar gets added to things, and it's just put in under the name natural ingredient or all natural ingredient. So you know what? Tea companies are soaking their leaves in sugar syrup, and it makes your tea sweeter. Son of a bartender, I'm diabetic, and 60% of Americans are diabetic or pre-diabetic. Son of a bartender. I mean, that's just evil. At any rate, I discovered this week Plum Deluxe teas, and I have ordered from them. I've had them before. I think they were at one of the yarn cons a while back, one of the stitches. I'm pretty sure it was Plum Deluxe, and Jasmine may have pointed me towards them. At any rate, I was reading their ads because I ordered teas from Harney & Sons, and I ordered hot apple spice and apple cinnamon, and they're very, very good. I sent a question to them. They have an Ask Mike Harney thing where he gets on live social media and answers questions. So I sent him a question and said, hey guys, are you soaking your tea leaves in sugar? So I'm waiting to see what the answer is, but I must say, their hot apple spice tea is very good. It's a black tea. Their apple cinnamon is very good. It's a black tea. My palate doesn't get a lot of difference between the two, but they're good. But in the meantime, I'm waiting for my Plum Deluxe teas to arrive because I know these guys are not soaking their leaves in sugar. So if you are looking for fresh, loose leaf tea, I heartily recommend Plum Deluxe just because you know you're drinking safe. In the meantime, I also looked at snarky teas. How did all this happen? My sister sent me Harney & Sons years ago, and I apparently got on their mailing list. I saw one of their ads on Instagram. I answered it. Now all the tea companies are writing to me. That's it. Okay, snarky teas. They have a filter to make cold brew iced tea. And I had recently bought one of these from another tea company that was, a big Shark Tank, not Rumble tea. Yeah, no, don't. Buy the snarky tea filter. It fits the mouth perfectly of a mason jar, and you can put a lid over it without it just bobbing loose. I really recommend this. They have a very fine metal mesh filter. Now, the other thing I'm going to tell you, even when you use a metal strainer, that will give you the least flavor. That when you put a filter or anything, including tea bags, in your tea, you do get flavor from it. That's true about coffee, but coffee drowns everything out. Okay, so if you're using a fine mesh filter like I am, in this case the Rumble filter, to make cold brew coffee, do not use that for your tea. I promise you there will be residual flavor. So do not do that. Okay, so I have a separate filter for my iced coffee from my filter, my Snarky Teas filter for my iced tea. I would tell you skip Rumble, go to Snarky Teas, buy two of those filters for the mason jars. They will even sell you the mason jar. I highly recommend them. It's also a woman-owned company. I'm just saying that's my personal bias. On to the blather. Well, the big blather, of course, would be stitches. But before I get to that, ASL, we are in week 13. So we are watching this documentary and writing a discussion on it. So I got through that handily and easily. Next week, I meet with my teacher on Monday to talk about my tall tale, which is called The Big Yellow Horse, which I have to tell on video for her to grade. She seems to really like my work. I'm feeling pretty good about that. But I do practice my tall tale frequently. If I make a good enough video, I will probably post it to my YouTube channel if you want to go look at it. But that's not there yet. The pup date. Well, we are training the pups. Now that we're all home, well, we were. That's a part of the story too. But now it is time to train the pups. And one of the things we're working on, we're working in the house right now, and we had to get them onto walking nicely on leashes because due to all the craziness, we hadn't gotten to that training. So I went down this week and I bought what are usually called choke chains or choke collars. If you're choking your dog, you're doing that wrong. So you need to know that, but they're called that because that's how people perceive them. It's a really good aid to training on a leash. Why? All right, you measure your dog's neck and you add 3 to 4 inches. and you go and you buy a collar that's in that range. Now, please look at a training book or a video on how to put the collar properly on your dog. The received wisdom, you make it into a P, and the long stalk of the P is going to be on top of the dog's neck, with the loop running around and under the dog's neck and coming up to have one loop of the chain over the running chain. Why? When you put it on the dog this way, it will relax. You're not keeping your dog on a tight chain around its neck. So as you walk, if the dog walks properly, the chain goes limp and the dog is not in any way restrained by the chain. So your dog's experience on a training chain collar is just walking normally. It isn't aware it's got this big thing around its neck that's going to choke it, blah, blah, blah. You don't want that. Having the dog think, oh my God, I'm getting choked, that's going to terrify your dog. Why would you do that? Okay, so please make sure you're doing this correctly. The other thing about getting the positioning right, how do you correct your dog? One swift upward pull in a straight line up. What does that do? It makes the chain go clunkety clunk click when it gets to the end of its run. So the dog hears ka-chunk when the chain gets to the end of its run. It hears it clicking and then it hears ka-chunk. And then the chain instantly relaxes because you do too. You don't keep your hand in a dragging position. All right, so what does this mean? When your dog is walking nicely at your side, nothing is happening to your dog. It's just walking. It may hear the chain rattling a little bit, but that's it. It doesn't feel the chain. It doesn't notice the chain. If the dog forges ahead immediately, and I mean immediately because you're going to be dragging the dog if you don't, you pull your hand, your left hand that's holding this, straight up above the dog. The chain will go rattle, rattle, clunk. The dog will feel a tightening around its neck. This will make the dog stop and you immediately release. You don't have to work hard to do it. You just drop your hand because the chain is properly positioned. It will immediately loosen. So please be aware. The training is rattle, rattle, clunk. The dog hearing a noise and feeling a tightening at its neck. If you ever drag your dog on a chain, you're probably interfering with the training, and your dog is going to be suspicious of the chain. Now, since I've said all this, if you don't know how to do what I'm talking about, go to a class with a competent trainer and learn to do this properly, because you don't train a dog by dragging it or by choking it. The dog should walk calmly at your side, and it should be virtually unaware that it's even leashed. This is also true on a harness. Your dog is being trained not to walk on a leash. Your dog is being trained to walk politely by your side, leashed or unleashed. The proof that this is working is you take the leash off and your dog continues to walk properly by your side. This is what all my dogs have done up to these two puppies, so we're working on this. So I bought the collars and I came home. And my husband had worked with Captain a little bit. So Captain I put on the chain. And Captain, does Captain. Oh, no, I hate this. And that took one brisk walk up and down the hall and around the living room, and Captain was walking nicely at my side, no consciousness of the chain. Queenie is further behind. I put the chain on her. You have to do this young with collies because they grow so much fur you can't do it after a while. Queenie began to freak out and to back into it. I'm not coming with you. I don't like this. That is the sign of a dog that is not ready for a leash or a chain collar. Okay, so what do you do at that moment? I put a 6-foot leash on her, a heavy web leash, and I let her drag it around the house. Why? Because I want her to get the concept of a leash not hurting her. So she did fine. She didn't even really pay attention to it from the very beginning. Now, the second part of that, every now and then you step on the leash. What? Yeah, and you don't make a big deal of it. You don't stop and signal her. You just are walking and you see the leash and you're walking by it. You step on it. She gets pulled to a stop. It's only connected to the hook on her collar, so you're not choking her or anything. So she just kind of gets stopped abruptly in her webbed mesh collar. So she's not getting choked. She just gets a sort of at her neck. Why? Because she first has to be given the concept that her collar is a signal, that she can be signaled. And if you signal her through the collar, what are you signaling? Usually stop. Don't forge ahead. Don't push into your collar. If your collar pulls at you, back away from it. Stop. pull your neck back and stop walking forward. So we did that. That took approximately 5 minutes. That I had her walk around the house one morning with the leash. Now, we made sure everything was out of the way so she couldn't tangle herself. We were very careful about that. We limited her to the open space of the living room and the dining room and the kitchen. And periodically, we all just would step on her leash without talking to her about it. We did not let my son engage in this because he wasn't getting it. We had him watch because I'm training him how to dog train. Okay, but in the meantime, we would occasionally just step on it. And I mean, step on it. You step on it and you keep on walking. You don't stop, you don't yank, you don't make a big deal out of it. But if she's walking and you step on the leash, she will get a tug on her neck and she will go, huh? And she will stop and look around. No yapping, no fear, nothing like that. We're not hurting her, okay? And so we did that for one morning. The next day, I leashed her without a choke. She walked perfectly on the leash. And she immediately got, when she forged forward, when the collar pushed into her neck, she immediately backed off. That's what you get from doing this. So Queenie has not been on the choke yet because Queenie's actually doing a really good job just walking around the house without it. Captain is hardcore. Captain wants to be out front. This is an indicator, by the way. When your dog wants to be out front, you can teach him to pull, which means pulling a cart with your groceries in it or pulling a bike that you're riding on. It's a lot of fun. Sled dog training. It's actually lead sled dog training. So Captain's a good prospect for that. Queenie, no. Queenie wants to stay back with us, and that's great. So we are working on that every day, about 5 minutes twice a day. You don't want to overdo this. A lot of treats, a lot of treats, a lot of treats. So Queenie's in her collar, and I put a leash on her, and she will every now and then. She'll back into the collar, and you just hold the treat out and say, come on, come on. Now, the other thing, you want to signal. So as you're walking forward, I will bump the dog lightly with my left outside leg. I will gently bump the dog and say, Queenie, come, and then start walking. Or actually, I say, come on. Come is come to me and sit down in front of me. Come on means walk with me. So I'll say, come on, Queenie, and I will lightly bump her. Now I don't have to. They both got it. That you say, come on, they know what's coming, so they immediately move on. But when you're starting, you can lightly bump the dog with the outside of your left leg. You're keeping your dog on your left, and you move forward. So both my dogs are working right now and walking nicely on the leash. They're doing very well. Hopefully this weekend we will take it outdoors. That takes a little more work. You don't take your dog outdoors until you can work them on a choke chain, because any normal dog outdoors is going to be wildly stimulated and going to start running around. What I would suggest, if you're going to train your dog outdoors, and you should, because this is real safety for the dog, this is how you protect your dog from running loose. If it gets away from you and it's leashed, you don't want it doing things like running into a street or getting hurt or chasing cars and all that. So you should be training your dog outdoors to walk nicely on a leash. If you're going to do that, treats, treats, treats. You have to be the person with the treats that the dog wants to be with, because it could be randomly rewarded with a treat. The other thing, if you're going to train outdoors, take your dog out for a few minutes and let them be on a loose leash doing whatever they want. Give them a few minutes to be outside. They're only dogs. They're highly stimulated by the outside. So that's the pup date. Everybody's working on walking nicely. It's going very nicely. The hub state, he's doing great, except, well, this is why it's called Banishment this time around. When I was away at Stitches, he tried to clean the house. He did a beautiful job. He did all those jobs I can't do because I'm allergic to the toxic cleaners that he wants to use that I probably wouldn't. It was all going well till he cleaned the oven. And then he cleaned it. He left the door open. I was away for, almost 48 hours. He washed it out repeatedly, but when you use toxic things like Easy Off, it bonds with the walls of the oven, so he kept trying to wash it off. Didn't work. I'm home seeing patients Tuesday, and he turns the oven on with no food in it. He's trying to burn off any residue. Yeah, to make a long story short, I had to go to a hotel for 2 nights while he finished that process and again cleaned out the oven. I'm deathly allergic. My throat closed. If I'd stayed too long, my nose would have closed, and that's called choking to death. It's called anaphylactic shock. I didn't go into it real fast. I'm lucky it wasn't like a finger snap thing. It took a few seconds for it to start happening. I tried leaving the house Tuesday for the afternoon. I came back in the evening, couldn't breathe, had to leave. And you're okay. The minute you're outside, you can breathe again. Your body tries to open up again, but it did take inhalant and a few things. So I've had a lovely 2 nights at a local hotel. I did see patients yesterday, Wednesday, at the hotel. It was actually very restful. I got to watch some Netflix and knit on the Hailing Frequencies hat. So all that is good. Meanwhile, stitches. So I went down Sunday morning and I got on the 210 freeway and people were drag racing, which scared me. So I had to go down the long, hard way following surface streets, but actually it was a nice drive. When I got there, I almost immediately ran into the wonderful Peachy, one of the Gin sisters, and she grabbed me and took me over to Pearly Shell's booth because she was excited about me spinning Minerva and said, you could blend it with this silk. So I did indeed buy those 2 skeins, as I've mentioned, the 2 braids rather, of the silk camel hair fiber blend from Pearly Shells. And so you will hear their interview at the end of this episode. If you look at my show notes, you can see my haul. And you can see the 2 braids are in there. And then there's 2 skeins of a DK weight from Dizzy Blondes of her show colorways. On the left, you'll see the red of the Hailing Frequencies open. Then to the right of it, there is the blue-green of, I can't think what it's called. Anyway, the Space Shuttle one. Can't remember the name of it. If you go to the far side of that picture, you'll see another green that is the DK as well, and the brown. Those are all Dizzy Blondes DK. I'm a big fan, as you can see. And there's also, to the right of that picture, you will see a picture. There's a plastic bag in the first picture with all the haul. And to the right, you'll see what's in the bag. It's the 6 mini skeins from Teton Yarns. I definitely want to know more about Teton Yarns as well. I do believe I have an interview with them. I have a few interviews. You will hear them after the next few episodes. You can see Teton Yarns' beautiful, beautiful show display. And there is our Peachy. And she got from Pearly Shell, she got their advent calendar. The one I was looking at was Northern Lights. She's got one that is from all the stop animation Christmas specials of the 1960s, was how it was described to me. She opened it in front of us. Oh my God. Okay, now Pearly Skeins, they offered me one of these in the Northern Lights. I'm regretting now I didn't buy it. They even offered me a discount. I should have bought it. Looking at hers, I thought, that is so much fun. I'm still struggling not to buy it, and I may yet. So you can see Peachy with her happy box there, and it's very beautiful. In the meantime, the Gins took me to the Yard House and bought me lunch, which Peachy did, which was like so nice. And then Smidge again tried to buy me dinner. These guys, like, too nice, too nice. I shouldn't tell you this because now you're going to all try to go exploit the Gins. You can't. They're mine to exploit. I tell you, they're mine. But anyway, also, Peachy introduced me to the insanely wonderful Cynthia, who is just a kindred spirit. I mean, she's just a sister from another mother, as I think we all are. I had such a good time with them. I can't thank them enough. They came back to my hotel room, and we sat and chatted, and then we went out to dinner after having lunch together. Honest to God, I don't know when I have had so much fun. I just cannot thank you enough, Peachy and Smidge and Cynthia. You just made my stitches. Also, Laura of Dizzy Blondes, thank you, thank you, thank you. You made my stitches. And the ladies of Pearly Shell and the lady of Teton Yarns, I just had a great, great time. On the calendar, the Romule break, December 26 to 31, I'll be hanging out locally. Any of you who are local, if you want to go out to coffee or tea during that time, Knitting Hiker, I'm trying to think who all's local. The Gins I just hit. Oh, I can't think of all of you who are local. And if you're local and you want to hang out somewhere between Christmas and New Year's, let me know. We'll see if we can meet up somewhere. We are on for the Grand Canyon, June 5th through 9th. I am tentatively on for Sunnybank, August 17th through 21st. Minerva gets the last word. Wow, we created her. While my husband was polishing floors and cleaning the oven and doing all this deep cleaning, Minerva had to go in a crate. You probably could hear the wailing for miles. However, when I walked out and talked to her, she sat very quietly in the crate. But yes, you can crate your cat, and you can put them in a dog crate made for giant dogs as long as your cat isn't going to slide between the bars. And she did very well in it. Did she like it? Are you joking? She's a cat. So there we go, folks. I am 4 minutes to patient, so this was perfect. It's been a blast talking to you. Remember, Everybody get your shots, wear your mask, wash your hands, socially distance. Oh yes, stitches. I was told that they weren't going to have precautions. They had a lot of precautions. The big one was we all had to show proof of immunization, which made me really happy, and they gave us a wristband to prove it. And then at Stitches, you could wear a sticker to show how much contact you were willing to have. I wore a mask around my neck. When other people were masked, I masked out of respect for them. If somebody wasn't masked or would hug me, I did unmask. The vendors, almost all of them were masked. And when I asked them about it, they said things along the lines of, I've been here 4 days. Are you kidding me? Of course I'm going to get exposed to COVID. So I want you to know, Stitches, these are not super spreader events so far. They're being very careful. I felt very safe. It has now been 4 days. I'm just fine. So they did a wonderful job. Thank you to the Stitches crew. I felt very, very safe. Ben Levacy and all of you, thank you. Deeply appreciated. So on that happy note, everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Okay, so we are at Stitches SoCal, and I'm with the insanely wonderful ladies of Pearly Shell Fiber Arts from, how do you say it, Ilwaco? Ilwaco. Okay, and here we have Danielle. You can't see her, but she's here. And Heather, you can't see her, but she's spinning. Tell me about what you sell, what you want my listeners to know.
We are a brick and mortar yarn shop. We started 8 years ago. We also have our own sheep. We have our own bunnies. We believe in enabling the entire world to spin and to knit and crochet and be creative in any way, shape, or form they choose to do it. And we do that every day of the year in Ilwaco, and then we go out and visit people all over at the fiber festivals.
And apparently you do, because you can say that without even stopping or pausing. You've got this down. By the way, they're wearing tricorn pirates hats, right. So you know they're authentic. Danielle, your turn, because you just did the whole store guide for me. That was Heather, by the way, giving the excellent introduction. Danielle, add to it. Impress everybody.
All right. So we are, like Heather said, all about all fiber arts, and we have classes. I teach a few very artsy wall hanging weaving courses, and I am also a crochet designer, so we have a lot of crochet in the shop and are welcoming to everyone.
And equal opportunity fiber artists.
Well,
yes.
What you're not seeing, and they're so used to it they're not saying, is I just bought 2 hanks of camel hair silk. Like, they've got insanely good fibers. What have you got here today? You've got the camel hair silk. What else have we got here today?
Well, we have a merino tencel that we have, that base is milled for us. That yarn that we absolutely love. And it's the color on that. It's shiny, but not like sparkly, just this rich depth of color and shine. And then we also have roving and yarn from our own sheep, and we call it our vintage collection because every year the fleeces are different, so it is a vintage. Ooh. Like wine.
Ooh. And Heather, you're over here like spinning at the speed of light. What do you spin? It's gorgeous. On a Magic Craft.
On a Magic Craft wheel, which we are Magic Craft dealers, and I am spinning Corriedale from our own flock that we blended with mohair and had locally milled, because we always do a fun blend when we take our things to the mill, because we really do believe in supporting small farms, and we only sell roving and fiber that we really stand behind and believe in, because there's no such thing as having fun spinning felty, nasty fiber, and we all know that we have to source our fiber from reputable sources. That is a big part of our business, is supporting small places and supporting people who have the same ethics and standards that we do.
And I'm just going to say, like, you're spinning at a relatively slow speed, and you're just coming up with the most beautiful, how can I say, like, intentionally uneven
this is an
single. It's beautiful.
Yarn.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
And when you spin an art yarn, I count. So every third count, I'm sending a chunk through.
Yeah, I can see.
So then that will make a balanced art yarn.
Yeah.
That will be usable for all sorts of fun stuff.
So at this point, what I would say is, if I could ever get back to the Columbia River Gorge, I'd be taking classes because this is like a masterpiece. This booth is beautiful, and it just kind of glows. And it's my range of colors, so wow, thank you.
And if you can't get to us in person, we do sell online, and we also offer classes online.
Thank you. That's the question I kept saying, and I got to remember to ask. Ooh. Okay, I'm going to stop it on that one. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we have come to the end of another episode of Cognitive. Please do not use this podcast to diagnose yourself. If you think you are having a mental health problem, please contact a licensed mental health professional. Show notes for these episodes can be found at cognitivepodcast, all one word, .blogspot.com. Episodes can be found at iTunes under the name Cognitive Podcast, but also can be found posted next to the show notes on the Blogspot page. Thank you so much for listening. Everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.